Okay, so hi everyone. I welcome you to the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi program of In the Studio. My name is Sara bin Safwan, and this is the first iteration of the In the Studio program, which focuses on a platform for contemporary artists living and working in Abu Dhabi. In light of these unprecedented times, we recognize that supporting the local art scene and the creative ecosystem is vital for its growth and sustainability. I'm joined by my colleague Sasha Kalter-Wasserman, and we're thrilled to introduce the artists themselves, Maitha Abdalla, Nasser Alzayani, Abdul Jabbar, and Hashel Lamki. In today's discussion, they will shed light on the importance of artistic studio practice and how they have been managing their time during quarantine, as well as share some insights from their various artistic journeys within the unique art landscape of Abu Dhabi and the UAE. If you haven't already, we hope you will immerse yourselves in the studio through this video series and share the experience with your friends and family via the hashtag #CultureAll and Guggenheim Abu Dhabi. The whole series is available to stream on abudhabiculture.ae. And though right now we're separated by screens and time zones, we hope you'll feel like you're in the room with us by sharing your questions for our artists in the YouTube comment box below. And we will try and get to as many as we can in the last 15 minutes of this discussion. So just feel free to submit your questions in the comment box, and we hope we can get to them at the end. And without further ado, I'd like to start the program.
Thank you, Sara, and thank you all for being with us today. As a curator, what I find most interesting is that while each of you works across diverse media in very different ways, at the same time, there is a shared thematic emphasis on memory. It's fragile, it's fallible, and it's an impetus for each of you. Can you tell us what it is about memory that's so intriguing to you at this point in time? Rand, can you start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Sara and Sasha, for having us today. I think in terms of memory, my interrogation of the subject is really kind of rooted in a desire to connect to or explore the sort of tenuous threads that connect you to a place or a time that is inaccessible to you, and kind of through that exploration really try to build some form of reconstructed image or experience that engages that memory and kind of brings it forth to the present.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and I think I deal a lot with those issues in trying to reconstruct these events and these experiences in my work. And I think what is important to me as well is this act of remembrance as a process that we all go through, as also a result of forgetting. And I think it's in those moments where you have a memory that is triggered through sound or smell or sight that, you know, the work begins to almost reconstruct itself and like create a new experience and a new life for a time or a place.
Well, in my case, I would say memory is not actually something that I rely on. There's a very thin line between memory and imagination, especially when your memories are based on events that happened when you were a child. Most of my work is actually revisiting those moments and those events and those feelings, and converting personal references, whether it was a particular memory or a particular event or a feeling. Yeah, so in my work, it is actually giving those memories and feeling a character and a face, and visualizing it. Let's say so, yeah.
And Hashel, what about you?
Yeah, in my case, sometimes I do refer to memory as a metaphor to kind of like communicate what I'm trying to raise as a question, but it also comes from a place of memory and distortion, and how, us, or at least in my case, I'm from a place that is constantly changing. So the idea of a memory is also being distorted over and over time. And how do you deal with that when there isn't a reference point, a clear reference point to your memory? So that's, how I deal with memory sometimes.
And I think, if our audience members have watched the videos, then you'll be able to see, the visual iterations of, these artists' practices, and see really how these sort of memories can be manifested in that way. And I think it's also interesting how each of you also have this desire, or this this interest to explore memory connected with a place. So Nasser, you were exploring Adari in Bahrain, and Rand, you were exploring Baghdad with the minaret of Ana, Maitha in Fujairah, and Hashel with Alain. And maybe we can start with Nasser on how, place and memory are maybe kind of interconnected.
Yeah, I think it also goes back to what Hashel was saying about this place that we're in, either in the UAE or in the region, is constantly undergoing change for a variety of reasons. And, in my case, it was an environmental one where the drying of a spring sort of sparked this memory that I had, and immediately became unclear to me whether this was something that I had actually experienced or not, because there was no evidence of it. No personal evidence, or ones that were, recorded by people who had gone there, or even at like an institutional level or governmental level. And so it really becomes this process of trying to uncover the truth. But the truth is a very dangerous place or thing to explore, because everyone who's had an experience of this one place can tell a different story. And it's there where this memory, or at least this collective memory, can present a picture that might not be completely true, but can be true to some people.
I would also agree with Nasser on that point, where as I said before, when I said memory is not something that I rely on, because especially with my work, as I said before, it's revisiting those events and those moments that happened way before, and I try to give those feelings and those imaginations a character and a face, let's say, and yeah, so
I very much like what you're saying. I think, what you're really articulating is that across your work, memory is a creative act. You are the ones creating it. But I'm also curious as to the level of open-endedness that you leave for the viewer in your work. That is, they seem not to be overly prescriptive. They seem more to be invitations to the viewer to interpret works for themselves. Can you talk about that?
I believe that's a question you're giving me, Sasha, right?
Whomever wants to answer shortly, if you'd like to begin. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just talk about my work. So I've always been interested in stories, and stories that are very personal to myself. And through visiting those memories and those imaginations, I try to bring them to paper first, and try to create those characters that later become like sculptures or in paintings, and they become very special to me, and they become part of me, and they are part of something that I had experienced, and I try to leave it for the viewer to read the story as they wish and as they think of. I mean, they are very personal, but again, it is a storytelling to me, and it is there for the viewer to take it as they like.
I think for me, kind of building off of what Maitha and Nasser were sort of saying, there's this kind of relationship between the kind of individual or the personal and then the kind of collective memory. And I think that my work sort of engages both of those in parallel in a way. And Nasser said something or used a word, evidence. And I think that's really sort of key, right? Because like evidence, like without the remnants of a thing, can we believe it really existed? And I think in many ways when, you know, there's this kind of fragility related to memory and in some cases also related to history. And so even if it's kind of like a shifting city or a place that has kind of undergone a lot of change over time or is being threatened somehow, how can you kind of latch on to that fragility and really kind of strengthen it or give it form in new ways, in new meaningful ways? And I think in terms of kind of your question, Sasha, about this sort of invitation to engage, I think because of this fragility, it's really hard, at least for me, to kind of build a very clear sort of narrative that's linear in a way. And so what I like to do is kind of like produce almost these fields of fragments that kind of are in dialogue with one another and can depending on the viewer, they can kind of start to formulate a picture in their own mind, in their own imagination of what they might mean or what they might represent.
Yeah, in my case, I'm kind of like still fresh and new when it comes to memory. And I've just, in my recent solo show that it's about to reopen, inshallah, very soon, I kind of like actually went on to dig and understand what memory is. And there's a body of work titled Versailles, and it's looking at places of origin, in my case, Al-Ain. Kind of understanding memory through the proximity of distortion and, you know, some of these places not exist anymore, and how do you trace that back? And it's a collective, as Rand was mentioning, it's a collective memory, and it is, you know, it's very subjective to the viewer to decide how much they want to go back to trace their own memory from these paintings. So Versailles is it's a room of 50 paintings hung in a salon style that it's looking at iconic monumental spaces in Al-Ain and Abu Dhabi, and that's like my reference point. And I try to kind of remove myself from the work, although it is strongly my journey, but it's the way it's depicting the scene and the paintings, they're very abandoned. So the viewer starts to interact with the work and like interject with their own memory and remember, you know, these places are maybe still around, or maybe they vanished because of the, you know, the rapid construction boom that we're going through right now. So that's how I deal with memory.
And speaking of individual and collective experiences, I think, you know, in our recent conversations, you've all, of course, mentioned what it's like being in or away from the studio due to COVID-19. And we really look to you as artists to capture this period of time. How has the pandemic affected your work? And will we see the memories that you are making now reflected in your work in process?
Personally, I don't know, like I'm not interested in responding directly to the pandemic when it comes to like what is actually it's going on, because I still need to wrap my head around it and fully understand what was like in the past 4 months. But I think what was important for me during this whole quarantine, self-isolation time is a time to self-reflect and kind of like process what was pending before, try new ideas, and push, you know, the conversation even forward. So similarly to what I was talking about in Versailles, I ended up being in a situation almost like forced to continue painting because, you know, there wasn't enough supplies for me to work from. So I ended up going to like different bookstores in Abu Dhabi and trying to gather or like salvage whatever canvases around. And then suddenly I realized I'm in another Versailles in my studio. All of these paintings hung in my space. And it's something that, you know, my process is always like I'm working on multiple things at the same time. And that's how, you know, things like keep rolling in the studio. And this time, you know, with like the romantic poetic idea of like escaping the city and being outside, it triggered like this memory of me being in New York almost 10 years ago, I think. So I started to unpack my time in upstate New York and that whole relationship between you know, being in the city and waiting for the weekend to go upstate and kind of like self-isolate because it's just getting too much. So the new body of work is looking at, you know, American landscapes, East Coast. Yeah.
Nasser?
Yeah, I think similarly, I'm not necessarily interested in addressing this idea of the pandemic or the current situation that we're in, but you know, I think it's equally important for an artist to have time to think and reflect as much as it is to have time to produce. And I've been, you know, whether in my studio or at home, you know, revisiting and trying to remember these projects that I've, you know, had recorded in my sketchbooks and that have, you know, sat on my shelves for months, if not years. And, you know, this, it's been a really interesting process of trying to, you know, recover what I thought was lost, but also trying to recover the way of thinking that, you know, I might have once had. And yeah, I'm curious to see how, if at all, the you know, lockdown or pandemic affects my making of work, but I think that's not going to be visible or have any evidence until, you know, maybe years in the future.
So for me, similar to what Nasser had said, actually, like this pandemic and the isolation that and the lockdown had forced me to go and dig into my older notebooks, into my older paintings and unfinished work or unfinished plans, and it helped me actually to rethink them again and to revisit them again, and I'm not sure if I'll be working. There will be like some references or some visuals that are resulted like by the pandemic, but we'll see. I mean, it's just fresh and we're still absorbing everything, and this is something maybe only the future would tell.
I think you're absolutely right. I think, you know, as artists, you need time to process the pandemic
Yes.
too. It'll filter into your memory in conscious and unconscious ways.
Right.
I think kind of similar to what Nasser was saying, there's this kind of natural rhythm to practicing artists, maybe these sort of ebbs and flows, right? And I came into 2020 just coming off this like production high of 2019. And I was already kind of like searching for that space of just like kind of a quiet space to sit back and reflect. But I mean, at the same time, so that was a kind of great opportunity to just sort of read and research and find new modes of inspiration. But I was also kind of preparing for a residency that involved kind of travel that was, you know, canceled obviously due to the situation, but it sort of shifted, you know, from a kind of physical residency to a virtual residency. And it actually, you know, despite some early hesitations, actually revealed so much to me about kind of how generous that that medium can be, how you can still kind of find ways to engage with people. It's a participatory project, and build that sense of community from a distance, and also gives you a kind of more drawn out space. I felt, you know, that you're kind of all sitting at home and really giving something your full time and attention. And so, yeah, it was really interesting, the way it revealed to me kind of like the shifts in practice that might emerge because of the situation that we're in.
Yeah, I think, you know, it all affected us in many different ways. And I know that some of you as well had restricted access to your studios because of the pandemic, which must have been quite difficult, and maybe resort to alternative ways, or maybe going back to research or going back to old work. And I think it's very inspiring that all of you have still tried to keep as productive and on your practice at the same time. And also just rolling back to everyone's experiences, all of you have gone through the Sheikh Salama bint Hamdan Emerging Artist Fellowship, also known as SEEF for those who don't know, and have spoken highly on how it helped you develop as an artist and the sort of thinking and critical thinking that, you know, takes place during that fellowship program. If you could share, and maybe we can start with Rand, what were the key takeaways from the program that stuck with you until today, and maybe how has that experience helped shape your process in your work?
Yeah, I think kind of process is the key word. I think SEEF is very much kind of instilled in us a process-based way of working, as opposed to really focusing on product. It gave us this space, kind of literally and metaphorically, to really kind of think about, you know, what it is that's kind of the main drivers for us in our practice, without really any pressure to show. I think many of people know SEEF as being kind of quite a, maybe, I don't know, a mysterious fellowship, because you don't really know what's kind of going on in it until the very end, when there's this kind of show. And although the show might, you know, hint at some sort of output, I think you'll see in all the cases here, like the four of us, that really the output from our SEEF fellowship was just the beginning of a much longer journey that we've all sort of been developing and growing and evolving over the past 3 or 4 years.
Nasser, do you want to maybe go through your experience of SEEF?
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming to you live from the SEEF studios, where I'm now the manager. And, you know, in my experience, it's been kind of this really, you know, it's really come full circle in a way where, you know, I was selected to be a part of this program, and at the time was, you know, very confused about what I wanted to do. And, you know, it really gave me this opportunity to explore what I was interested in and kind of have this freedom to do whatever I wanted. And I think that, you know, the availability of that time, but more importantly, I think the community that was around me and in the studio with me was what really, you know, made me decide that I wanted to pursue this. And, you know, having gone to, you know, get my MFA, I'm now back and kind of on the other side of, I don't know, of this program. And it's really exciting to see, you know, all these brilliant young artists come here and seeing also the connections that they're forming. And it makes it really exciting to kind of predict what's going to happen in the future. I mean, we're all here today after 5 or 4 years post SEEF, and so, you know, it's, again, I reiterate, I think really exciting to maybe you know, look forward to what this younger generation can offer.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how all of a sudden, you know, we've seen such a growth, you know, over the last 10 years of, you know, artists just kind of like coming and pushing, or people wanting to become artists in the UAE. And I think it's really quite interesting. And SEEF has sort of been this very kind of like common experience that it's almost like, the gateway into the art world to become, an artist. And it's really interesting. And then through that as well, you create friendships, you start conversing with people who are like-minded and also push you to develop your work as well. And it's wonderful to see that now, everyone is sort of like on this other side and progressing and developing. And maybe we can touch upon as well, Hashel and Maitha, both of you, after SIF have continued to develop as artists and also have continued to create this artist community through Beit 15. And maybe you want to speak about that, and how that has sort of also become part of the Abu Dhabi identity in the art landscape.
I mean, yes, I'll just go back a little bit, even before even before being part of the Salama Fellowship. I remember meeting up with Hashel, and we were really like urging for that community and that having that space where all artists will come together and we will talk about art. We will have our studios in the same space. We would meet other artists who are in Abu Dhabi or in the Emirates. So we both applied for the Salama Fellowship, and we were in the same cohort. And after graduation, we realized that we still wanted that community. I mean, once you are a SIFer, you can't just go out of it. I mean, it is like a family, and as you mentioned, it is a friendship that you create, and you get to know all these amazing artists that are not only from Abu Dhabi, but like from the other Emirates. That's when we met with Afra Dahi, who's also like a SIFer, and we created Beit 15 altogether. Maybe Hashel, you would want to add to that as well.
Sure. It's to me, SIF like came at the right time and the perfect time when, everything was just aligned. I just moved back from the States, and my kind of like quick history, I was in LA most of the time, and then went to New York for 7 years, did what I did, came back, and then it was SIF, and then Beit 15. So I think what, as Maitha mentioned, like we were trying to start something before getting to SIF, but had we not gone through SIF, I think Beit 15 would have been in a different structure. I think what is so interesting about SIF is actually, all of these different prompts that are, you go through them, and then at the end, you decide how much you want to take out of it and how much you actually, kind of like push forward and figure out your own voice as an artist. And I think the program is super generous, like not just in UAE, but also the trip that we go to the States, and we have access to places, that I never thought we'll go to, the conservation department at MoMA, all of these incredible opportunities that, that the program is trying to enable you to become a better artist. And I think, it's a blessing. And through that, we got to meet Afra during her MFA program at RISD. We came back, and things have been rolling since then. Yeah, and slowly we're getting to know other cohorts and meeting them, and kind of like building this network that is incredible, because that's what artists want, is a community where you share and have a critique and be able to discuss your work, and I think it's very important to have such a great opportunity.
And speaking of community and identity and the local grassroots and also institutional art scene in Abu Dhabi, as artists, what are your hopes for the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi, an institution that is both dedicated to building a contemporary collection that is more fully representative of the world in which we live, and also showcasing works by established and early career artists? Rand, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, I think, it's in a very interesting position because it's going to be the kind of first contemporary arts institution in Abu Dhabi, at least. And it's going to have to kind of find a way to bridge that line between its sort of international audience, but also its kind of local community, and figure out a way to kind of mediate between those two worlds. I hope that it has the sort of energy and flexibility of the kind of emerging place that it's situated within, and kind of have that real freedom to experiment and explore and be part of the shifting landscape of the city and its artists.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, and I think what excites me the most about going to museums when I'm visiting a city is learning something about this place that you wouldn't be able to learn anywhere else. And so with projects such as the one we were all a part of now with the Guggenheim, I think it's really starting a connection with this community in this place that you're not going to find anywhere else. It's something that is unique to our experiences, and it's really something that needs to be documented. And I mean, this also goes back to memory, but it's this is a time that we hope we can look back on and really explore and learn from.
I mean, similar to what Rand and Nasser had mentioned, I mean, very high hopes for the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi, but I mean, I hope to see the involvement of involving young artists or early stage artists and artists from the region also, not only in the Emirates, because it is very important also to go back, as Nasser said, and document the art scene in the region and in the United Arab Emirates. We hope to see that, and we hope to also to see the younger generation also getting involved in the journey.
Everything was covered, but I think what's really important is actually to have to start rolling. I mean, looking at the short history of the past 5 decades, there is a lot of artists are coming up now, and now today we have, I think, 4 institutes that provide a BFA program from Sharjah to Dubai to Abu Dhabi, and would also see if there's this whole idea of art is very important. And I think institution also, artists need institution, and institution needs artists, and we kind of find that middle ground where we start having conversation, and then there is dialogue, then there is progress, then there is movement, and going back to the first thread that we were talking about memory, I remember in New York, Sasha, correct me if I'm right, there was the Museum Mile weekend where it's every month. At the end of the month, all of the museums open up to the public, and you have that experience. And I hope one day I have that also, in the Saadiyat cultural district, with all of the museums being there, and I can maybe take my kids and have a weekend, jumping from one museum to another. So that's super exciting, and it's super, refreshing to have that accessible for us in Abu Dhabi and UAE.
I think it's also, sorry, I think it's also really, you touched on something really important, which was this kind of symbiotic relationship between the artist and the institution. And I would take that even further, and not even say not only artists, but also curators and critics and writers and people who we interact with all the time. And I think it's within those conversations that interesting projects and ones that we really want to show to the public, because the public is also another player in this kind of cycle and this relationship. And so it's, we might not always be in direct contact, but there might be someone who who can make that link.
Yeah, I think that, I agree with what everyone has been saying. And, for a long time, artists were kind of in their field and institutions were in their field. And then now they're sort of, it's starting to merge a little bit more, and the gap is starting to bridge even more. And I think, between grassroots and independent and the institutions and the government, their aims and goals are very much interconnected, and they really work well with each other. And it's been amazing to see as well. I remember when I was younger and there was 0 contemporary art exhibitions, and I didn't know anyone else who were interested in arts and things like that. And now it really is such an abundance, to have all of that around, and such a wonderful community, and it's continuing to grow and continuing to thrive. And I think what's really amazing about everyone is that everyone is really aware and observant of their surroundings and their environment, and knowing exactly what is needed in order to make it develop. And I think before we head into questions, and I think for any of our viewers who are maybe new to the art landscape in Abu Dhabi, and we've given it a little bit of a taste here in this conversation, but maybe Nasser, if you want to start off, if you were to explain to someone who had no idea what was going on here, I guess what would you say or describe what the art landscape is in Abu Dhabi?
Well, I mean, I would definitely say it's in its early stages. And, I'm saying this even though something like, a program like SIEF has been around for almost 8 years now, but I still think it's at this point where we're finally growing to amass enough artists for, community, for this larger community to also branch out and form other initiatives, other collectives like Beit 15. And it's with that growth that I think this, the diversity of art in this place really becomes extremely rich. I mean, there's also, other, venues like Warehouse 421, which I think really tries to engage with the community. And it becomes a space where younger artists, or maybe not younger artists, but I would say at least artists who are interested in, branching out and putting work out there in this place where they may not have before. I mean, I'm thinking about Hashel's show, which, yes, again, is opening very soon. But that's something that. And I mean, Maitha as well, had a show at Warehouse 421. And so I think that it becomes this place that allows you to explore ideas and allows you to show work and engage with the public. And it's within those venues and amongst, our, kind of informal gatherings where you.
Sorry, we lost Nasser in the last bit there. I think he's back now, though.
I just wanted to say something about kind of in Abu Dhabi, in the 90s and maybe even the late 80s, I think back to the Cultural Foundation and the kind of role that institution played within the city, kind of the first arts classes, exhibitions, concerts I attended were at the Cultural Foundation. It was really a kind of hub for the arts, both for the city, but also really for the country as well. Like a lot of the UAE's kind of prominent artists really first showed their work at the Cultural Foundation. And so, that was sort of, closed for a long time, and it's kind of now with its reopening has really kind of reactivated such an important space within the city. And at the same time, it kind of emerged at a time where the government has been investing a lot in institutions and cultural institutions, whether we're thinking about, Louvre Abu Dhabi, which opened, and all the other museums around it, Warehouse 421, and also kind of NYU with its gallery and also its arts program. I think that it's sort of creating, a focus on arts that is kind of much more institutional, but at the same time, I think something that really distinguishes Abu Dhabi is also its kind of focus on education. And we see that kind of with a very strong drive even within DCT and its education department and the kind of various arts education facilities that they've sort of opened up in the city, of course, SIF, and obviously the kind of NYU and Zayed University. So there is really much this kind of interest in engaging awareness or increasing awareness and also community engagement in the arts in the Emirates, kind of as a way to create that symbiotic relationship we're talking about, not just between artist and institution, but the institution and its public.
I think what Ran just mentioned, art education, that's a key word. Triggering back like memories, since we're talking about memories. I mean, it needs to start also at a much, much earlier age. I grew up going to public schools in UAE, and art education stops at grade 6. And I think there is a huge gap between grade 6 all the way to go to get your BFA, where art is kind of like, is not being addressed. And it's important to continue the conversation from earlier on. So when you get to your BFA program, you've gone through, enough exercise of, interacting with art, and it kind of like creates, this strong connection with what we're doing right now. I mean, there is a huge disconnection, and I see the maybe frustration with like the different educational programs through different institutions and trying to gather or like capture more audiences. But I think it all needs to go back to education from the beginning and the importance of art for us all.
I totally agree with that, with what Hashel had said. And just to add to that, not everyone is going to graduate as an artist, and not everyone is going to want to become an artist, but there has to be an education system that allows the student to think critically, to see the beauty behind art. We have amazing, generous institutions. We have amazing institutions like the Louvre and the other museums that have been opening. Those students need to be able to go to these museums and enjoy the artworks and critique these artworks in their heads, whether they are artists or not. I mean, that's, I feel like the gap that, or that's what is needed right now, is to bring that art education on and to create that kind of sense of realizing what art is and what it does to the community and to the soul. So yeah, I think there are a lot of institutions, very generous. The government had like established very generous institutions but I feel like now it is on the artist's hand, like the individuals to start initiatives, to start art collectives, to be part of the community and to actually like just give back to the community. So yeah, I think that is.
Thank you so much. And we are right on time at the end of our, 15 minutes. And I'm going to be opening the panel to questions straight from the audience. So our first question is, and I think I'll direct this to Rand, and then we can move on to the next question, as we want to make sure that we have enough time for everyone. The first question is, how do you deal with the annihilation of memory when the places you are rendering are destroyed or rebuilt? Does that change your memorial narrative in terms of its sense of time, past, and present?
Oof, that's the million-dollar question that we're all sort of struggling with. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's really that tension that I find the most interesting, right? Like, again, kind of going back to the fragility of memory or the fragility of place. And so kind of, trying to evoke its presence or evoke its atmosphere, or even if it's kind of like draw attention to its history, its story, its narrative, and try to kind of, bring it back and make it actually a very active agent. When I don't think of memory and history as sort of static things, I'm very much interested in kind of how they shape a sort of discourse with our present and our future. And so I feel like I feel this sort of sense of responsibility to kind of try to tie it in to current discourse, and draw attention to it in order to kind of preserve in some form, in some way, even if it's kind of by allowing a viewer some form of experience with it that kind of allows it to kind of stick in their own memory or pass on through them. So that's the sort of the space that I'm working.
Can I add to that? Yeah, and I think even further, people who experience our work, and I think I've spoken to Rand about this a lot, is that they go away with a memory of a place, and so even though it might be not a direct experience, but it is one that reiterates an original one, and from that you can create a whole tree that is branching out of all of these individual memories that may be made up of one, or like had started from one that is not even your own. And I think to me that is where it's extremely fascinating. It's like I may be talking about a place in Bahrain that is very personal to me, but no one who's seeing the work has experienced, and yet they go away learning about this place and potentially having memories of it, ones that might be false, because for all I know mine could also be false, but they're memories that then are not static, and they begin to grow and have lives of their own.
And turning to another question from the audience, what are you looking forward to as we hopefully move towards the so-called new normal? What projects are you working on and are coming up for you? Hashel?
I'm still stuck in the past. I'm waiting for my solo show to reopen. So there is no new projects for me, and hopefully, that like kind of like takes its own life, and and then kind of have like I need to take a break also, as I've been also producing on my studio on a new body of work, and so that's there's no like specific projects that I'm working on right now, but yeah.
Well, we'll stay tuned.
Yes,
Keep
please.
us posted. And
September 1st, the solo show opening at Warehouse 42.
something's percolating, we're sure.
Yes.
Rand, would you like to?
Bye.
I mean, for me, I'm kind of I kind of spoke a little bit earlier about this sort of residency that shifted to the virtual space. But yeah, it's built this kind of community of people that I'm very, very much eager to kind of meet with and, feel each other's presence and be able to kind of build a project together that is very much based on kind of collective memory, which we've been discussing quite a bit today. So, it's going to take a lot of negotiation, kind of a lot of, development and back and forth. And I'm very much eager to kind of be able to be in that space with them and think through these ideas together.
For me, as I said before, it was very much the revisiting of older works and older paintings that I haven't finished, and I think I have now like a good body of work that I've had actually finished during this quarantine period. All of them are of older thoughts and older paintings that I've never got to finish, and so yeah, it was a good time to go back and revisit and see what the changes are, because like by time you change, I mean, I did a lot of writing, I did a lot of painting, and when you revisit your older work, you realize that you are not the same person anymore, especially if the work you have done like way back, and you start to add to it and you start to evolve it, and it becomes a body of work that is from your time now.
And I think we have another question as well, and maybe I don't know who would like to tackle this, so feel free, whoever would like to. When talking about art education, a challenge might be whether to focus on heritage arts versus contemporary art. What approach do you suggest, and how could we reconcile both in the UAE?
By heritage, I mean, is that a question in terms of like craft, or, I mean, I guess regardless, I don't think it's sort of this or that. I think it's very much kind of like a parallel approach. You can't look at things in isolation of one another. They are part of a kind of much longer trajectory. You'll find kind of, relationship between kind of modernist painting and traditional weaving. There are all these kind of like relationships that influence each other, and in terms of like representation, and in terms of like the way of thinking. And so I think, what's actually really interesting in terms of education is actually being able to like make those connections for people, to show that art isn't, something that exists at a sphere that is outside everyday experience or outside of, heritage or history, but actually is very much in dialogue with it. And it's when you make those connections is when people, I feel, become build much stronger bonds or connection to it.
Yeah, I think also taking that further and also connecting this word heritage to an interest that I think both Rand and I have in archaeology, and that is what this term, or like this I guess this process of trying to preserve a heritage is doing. And yeah, it is through those conversations with professionals in other fields where these connections are formed, and then those initial ideas that you have for work are really elevated to another level, because you're not just producing the work, but you're also learning how to produce a work in a brand new way. And so I agree. I don't think you can really separate those two. And yeah, I think that answers the question.
I would add one word also, art history, like going all the way back and beyond this territory that is defined today as UAE, but also looking outside of art beyond what we already know. I think it's also very important to include that in the conversation, whether it's heritage or contemporary, because you get to see the full picture.
And I think, and then for another question, and maybe Maitha, you would like to take this one. What do you think lies ahead for grassroots artistic communities in the UAE? What do you hope artists in their teens and early 20s can learn from your experience as pioneers through SIF and Beit 15?
So yeah, I think this is, I think we talked about this in the conversation a little bit, where this is the role of initiatives like Beit 15 and other collectives, and is to create this community and involve younger artists, involve the community in this conversation, and allow them to be part of the art scene. Include them in the conversation and have them visit the studios and be part of this community. So I think, someone wants to add to that. I mean, that's something that we talked about, and more to come, inshallah. I mean, we see a lot of art collectives coming up as well, and we are not the first, and we are not going to be the last as well. I mean, there is a long history also in the UAE of initiatives such as Beit 15, the Flying House, a lot of different initiatives in Sharjah and Dubai, in Abu Dhabi. So there are a lot to look at, and it's just like it becomes it becomes like the individual's choice whether they want to be involved or not. I mean, there are a lot of ways that they can start from.
I think also what's important is to take ownership on the practice and believing in their own practice and developing and keep pushing. I think that's something, you know, it's a good advice for the young generation, because there is like some sort of expectation that this is going to be provided, or this is, you know, lack of words, like Santa is not going to show up. So you kind of have to like do it yourself, and if you believe in it, you have to make it happen for you first, and then that enables like the conversation, and there's more.
Exactly, and not actually just wait for opportunities, Hashel, just adding to that, like not waiting for opportunities and just keep producing and keep practicing, and you know, visit those collectives, visit artists, and just be there, be around. And that's I think the advice. I mean,
yeah, I think we're such a kind of a relatively small community, but one that's quite generous. And I feel like kind of what like Maitha was saying about kind of reaching out to people. I think if there's an artist you admire, kind of reach out to them, talk to them about your work, talk to them about their work, visit them in their studio, or have them over for a studio visit. I think it's like in creating these opportunities for dialogue amongst the community, which is very much, you know, quite accessible here in Abu Dhabi, in the UAE in general. I think you learn so much through these kind of conversations and interactions that you have with other people.
That's such important advice for younger artists who look to you as inspiration. I think also we're just at time now, so we'd like to thank everyone for joining us for this first iteration of the In the Studio program, and also remind you that the whole series is available to stream on abudhabiculture.ae. So we invite you to learn more about each of the artists individually and their collective practice by viewing these In the Studio videos and sharing the experience with your friends and family.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.